Section 10. A. The President is authorized to prescribe such rules and regulations as may be necessary to carry out the purposes of this title, and fees for licenses, and for filing codes of fair competition and agreements, and any violation of any such rule or regulation shall be punishable by fine of not to exceed $500, or imprisonment for not to exceed 6 months, or both. B. The President may from time to time cancel or modify any order, approval, license, rule, or regulation issued under this title, and each agreement, code of fair competition, or license approved, prescribed, or issued under this title shall contain an express provision to that effect. Title II Public Works and Construction Projects. Federal Emergency Administration of Public Works. Section 201. A. To effectuate the purposes of this title, the President is hereby authorized to create a Federal Emergency Administration of Public Works, all the powers of which shall be exercised by a Federal Emergency Administrator of Public Works, hereafter referred to as the Administrator, and to establish such agencies, to accept and utilize such voluntary and uncompensated services, to appoint, without regard to the civil service laws, such officers and employees, and to utilize such federal officers and employees, and, with the consent of the state, such state and local officers and employees, as he may find necessary, to prescribe their authorities, duties, responsibilities, and tenure, and, without regard to the Classification Act of 1923, as amended, to fix the compensation of any officers and employees so appointed. The President may delegate any of his functions and powers under this title to such officers, agents, and employees as he may designate or appoint. B. The Administrator may, without regard to the Civil Service laws or the Classification Act of 1923, as amended, appoint and fix the compensation of such experts and such other officers and employees as are necessary to carry out the provisions of this title, and may make such expenditures, including expenditures for personal services and rent at the seat of government and elsewhere, for law books and books of reference, and for paper, printing, and binding, as are necessary to carry out the provisions of this title. C. All such compensation, expenses, and allowances shall be paid out of funds made available by this Act. D. After the expiration of 2 years, after the date of the enactment of this Act, or sooner if the President shall by proclamation, or the Congress shall by joint resolution declare that the emergency recognized by Section 1 has ended, the President shall not make any further loans or grants, or enter upon any new construction under this title, and any agencies established hereunder shall cease to exist, and any of their remaining functions shall be transferred to such departments of the government as the President shall designate, provided that he may issue funds to a borrower under this title prior to January 23, 1939, under the terms of any agreement or any commitment to bid upon or purchase bonds entered into with such borrower prior to the date of termination under this section of the power of the President to make loans. Section 202. The Administrator, under the direction of the President, shall prepare a comprehensive program of public works, which shall include among other things the following. A. Construction, repair, and improvement of public highways and parkways, public buildings, and any publicly owned instrumentalities and facilities. B. Conservation and development of natural resources, including control, utilization, and purification of waters, prevention of soil or coastal erosion, development of water power, transmission of electrical energy, and construction of river and harbor improvements and flood control, and also the construction of any river or drainage improvement required to perform or satisfy any obligation incurred by the United States through a treaty with a foreign government heretofore ratified, and to restore or develop for the use of any state or its citizens water taken from or denied to them by performance on the part of the United States of treaty obligations heretofore assumed, provided that no river or harbor improvements shall be carried out unless they shall have heretofore or hereafter been adopted by the Congress, or are recommended by the Chief of Engineers of the United States Army. c. Any projects of the character heretofore constructed or carried on either directly by public authority or with public aid to serve the interests of the general public. d. Construction, reconstruction, alteration, or repair under public regulation or control of low-cost housing and slum clearance projects. e. Any project, other than those included in the foregoing classes, of any character heretofore eligible for loans under sub-section A of Section 201 of the Emergency Relief and Construction Act of 1932, as amended, and paragraph 3 of such subsection A shall for such purposes be held to include loans for the construction or completion of hospitals, the operation of which is partly financed from public funds, and of reservoirs and pumping plants, and for the construction of dry docks, and if in the opinion of the President it seems desirable, the construction of naval vessels within the terms and/or limits established by the London Naval Treaty of 1930, and of aircraft required therefore, and construction of heavier-than-air aircraft, and technical construction for the Army Air Corps, and such Army housing projects as the President may approve, and provision of original equipment for the mechanization or motorization of such Army tactical units as he may designate, provided, however, that in the event of an international agreement for the further limitation of armament to which the United States is signatory, the President is hereby authorized and empowered to suspend, in whole or in part, any such naval or military construction or mechanization and motorization of Army units, provided further that this title shall not be applicable to public works under the jurisdiction or control of the architect of the Capitol, or of any commission or committee for which such architect is the contracting and/or executive officer. Section 203. A. With a view to increasing employment quickly, while reasonably securing any loans made by the United States, the President is authorized and empowered, through the Administrator, or through such other agencies as he may designate or create, 1. To construct, finance, or aid in the construction or financing of any public works project included in the program prepared pursuant to Section 202. 2. Upon such terms as the President shall prescribe, to make grants to states, municipalities, or other public bodies for the construction, repair, or improvement of any such project, but no such grant shall be in excess of 30% of the cost of the labor and materials employed upon such project. 3. To acquire by purchase, or by exercise of the power of eminent domain, any real or personal property in connection with the construction of any such project, and to sell any security acquired, or any property so constructed or acquired, or to lease any such property with or without the privilege of purchase, provided that all monies received from any such sale or lease, or the repayment of any loan shall be used to retire obligations issued pursuant to Section 209 of this Act, in addition to any other monies required to be used for such purpose. 4. To aid in the financing of such railroad maintenance and equipment as may be approved by the Interstate Commerce Commission as desirable for the improvement of transportation facilities, and 5. To advance, upon request of the Commission having jurisdiction of the project, the unappropriated balance of the sum authorized for carrying out the provisions of the Act entitled An Act to Provide for the Construction and Equipment of an Annex to the Library of Congress approved June 13, 1930, 46 Statute 583, such advance to be expended under the direction of such commission, and in accordance with such act, provided that, in deciding to extend any aid or grant hereunder to any state, county, or municipality, the President may consider whether action is in process, or in good faith assured therein reasonably designed to bring the ordinary current expenditures thereof within the prudently estimated revenues thereof. The provisions of this section and Section 202 shall extend to public works in the several states: Hawaii, Alaska, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the Canal Zone, and the Virgin Islands. B. All expenditures for authorized travel by officers and employees, including subsistence, required on account of any federal public works projects, shall be charged to the amounts allocated to such projects. notwithstanding any other provisions of law, and there is authorized to be employed such personal services in the District of Columbia and elsewhere as may be required to be engaged upon such work, and to be in addition to employees otherwise provided for. The compensation of such additional personal services to be a charge against the funds made available for such construction work. C. In the acquisition of any land or site for the purposes of federal public buildings, and in the construction of such buildings provided for in this title, the provisions contained in sections 305 and 306 of the Emergency Relief and Construction Act of 1932, as amended, shall apply.